Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we are going to be previewing the upcoming season for the Los Angeles Chargers. I think that we are closing out here with the AFC West, finishing off the AFC altogether, and we will see how they stack up against the rest of the division and more. But honestly, as much as you can look at the remainder of the NFL and look how the Chargers stack up, this season is more so about just building on the foundation of what this new Chargers regime is going to look like under Jim Harbaugh, who they signed in the offseason to be their head coach. And Harbaugh has a tremendous amount of success on his resume that makes you think that the Chargers can definitely be in contention shortly, but there are still a number of different holes with the roster, and Harbaugh, who throughout his time with the 49ers, I don't believe ever had a season where he had a losing record, so and just is coming off of a national championship at Michigan, was very successful there as well, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit of time to see it fully come to fruition. But we're all feeling very high about the prospects of it because of the fact that they have a quarterback in Justin Herbert that has shown so much potential over the course of the first few seasons, but hasn't. First off, it's the Chargers, so the Chargers always seem to get the short end of the stick in terms of some of the luck that plays into, just generally speaking, Chargers history, and that they have had a number of injuries and such that have derailed them at times, but some self-inflicted wounds as well. Now, Herbert is coming off of a season where he missed the final 4 games due to a broken finger on his throwing hand. That is now fully recovered, and it seemed like he was going to be in prime position to take off headed into this season, but we did just get the news late last week that he has a foot injury that is going to keep him out for a lot of training camp. And that is something that does worry me a little bit. We saw Joe Burrow last season with the Cincinnati Bengals dealing with the calf injury that ultimately affected the first few weeks of his season. Hopefully, that's not something that ends up being the case for Herbert, but it is something that you have to take into consideration. But again, regardless of, this season, feels like the future is bright where they bring Harbaugh in for, I believe it's the next 5 years. Justin Herbert just last July signed a 5-year contract extension worth $262.5 million in July, which I believe now officially starts this year. So I think it's another 5 years of Herbert and Jim Harbaugh, and you feel like that could very easily be the foundation for a championship contending team. But they lost a lot of pieces on offense this past year, and again, they're going to be doing a fair amount of retooling in the next year or so, where many of the main staples of their offense in these past few seasons left in free agency. It was Austin Eckler straight up leaving in free agency, but it was also the Chargers who came into this past offseason with a disastrous financial situation. They had to cut costs. They weren't able to work on contract restructures with Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, so they end up releasing Williams and trading Keenan Allen to the Bears. So it is a lot of new pieces in terms of the receiver room. Add on to it the fact that their starting center, Corey Linsley, I don't think has officially made it official that he is retiring. So that's some changing on the front line as well. If you know about Jim Harbaugh and his time at Michigan, starts with the line of scrimmage, which is ultimately why he ended up taking Joe Alt with that 5th overall pick. So a lot of reloading necessary, as this is a Chargers offense that, again, keep in mind Justin Herbert was out the last 4 games of the season, but was overall pretty mediocre. The numbers that do stand out are the ones where Herbert is more so in control, the passing offense and the red zone offense, but the run game has been largely non-existent for them in recent years. Austin Eckler, of course, had his stretch where he was among the best running backs in the league, but it was very clear that Eckler, the age was running up there. He didn't have that same burst and acceleration that he used to, so they end up making a change there, bring in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins to be your top two running backs out of the backfield. They signed DJ Chark, a veteran wide receiver as well, to try and help, round out their core there a little bit. Combination of tight ends and Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst, and they do at least sign a replacement center in Bradley Bozeman, was previously with Carolina, started a few seasons for Baltimore from 2019 to 2021, so they have some experience there, but there really isn't a true, number one offensive weapon outside of course, Herbert. But you look, they've taken some swings in the draft at wide receiver the past couple drafts. It was Quentin Johnston in the first round of 2023, Ladd McConkey early in this past year's draft in the second round early on there. So you have some notable names, but definitely not a true number one option, and that's going to be something that I think the Chargers will absolutely be in the market for. Stay tuned on that a little bit, because I don't think they're going to be, we're going to be getting into the schedule and my overall prediction for them this year. I don't think that they are going to be at the very top of the draft. So when you hear some of these names that are being bounced around, and obviously, like I just mentioned, the Chargers have been in a tough financial situation. I'm sure there's probably slight hesitation about going and throwing a whole lot of money at somebody, but with everything we've heard about T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk this offseason, Chargers could be a sneaky destination for some of the better wide receiver names when the time comes. But as for this season, I do think that they're just going to, and maybe it's not even the worst thing in the world if Herbert has to spread the ball around a little bit more, but I think that he's shown he's already capable of that, especially with the injuries that have been afflicting both of his receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams the past few years, that I think it's going to be, again, just finding that offensive identity a little bit this year with Jim Harbaugh. But looking at the defense, definitely did leave a lot to be desired last year. Now, when you talk about some of the bad contracts that were handed out, you can definitely look at the defensive side of the ball for some of those big-time contracts. They had to part ways with J.C. Jackson after handing him a lot of money a couple off seasons ago, and they were at least able to rework some deals with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, I would say, their two best players on defense. Derwin James, you can make an argument for there as well. But this was good to get their guaranteed money a little bit lower. There were some compensations as well for Khalil Mack. His deal expires at the end of this year. By taking the less money this year, he is not to be franchise tagged after this year, and he's probably going to cash out, considering he had a pretty quiet 17 and a half sacks last season. But Joey Bosa has played in just 14 games over the course of the past two seasons, so you have some experience there with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, but ultimately, you do have to question a little bit what you are getting out of that. Now, they bring in a familiar face in Denzel Perriman to try and shore up the front seven a little bit. Spent his first 6 seasons with the Chargers, went on to become a Pro Bowler with the Raiders in 2021, but has had some injury struggles since then. He's on the other side of 30 now. He's a positive run stopper, but isn't exactly a game changer, but someone I at least wanted to mention, considering the fact that are definitely looking to shore up that front seven a little bit. But the offense is, or the passing offense is really what was a concern for them. 250 pass yards per game last year. They didn't get enough production from their pass rush, and their secondary just flat out isn't very good in my eyes. Now, like I mentioned, Khalil Mack casually had a career-high 17 sacks last year. Joey Bosa can stay healthy. That is probably, good for 10-plus sacks. So if they're both on the field, you feel like the pass rush can definitely get better this upcoming year, but that is a little bit of an if. I do expect Tuipulotu to take a step forward this year out of that linebacking core as well. So that's something I would be looking forward to if I am a Chargers fan. But again, in that secondary, outside of Derwin James, there's not very much proven whatsoever. They tried to add a little bit, bringing in Christian Fulton this offseason, but I'm not sure how much of a help that is necessarily, considering the fact that, according to Sharp Football Analysis, he allowed 14.2 yards per target when lined up on the outside last season. So I think there is a lot to be desired from that cornerback room, but we will have to see there. Looking at their schedule for the upcoming season, it is very winnable. I believe Sharp Football Analysis had them in the top 3 easiest schedules this season, and you can kind of see why, where there really aren't any elite championship contenders on their schedule necessarily, other than the Chiefs, of course, in their own division, and then they have a couple home games against the Bengals and the Ravens. So probably losses in both of those books as well, especially considering the fact that the Chargers don't necessarily have much of a home field advantage. But, outside of that, I think that the Chargers have a very passable schedule in front of them, and they can at least be in the playoff hunt for a lot of the year. Now, I'm definitely looking at the first few weeks as well, considering the fact that Justin Herbert has this foot injury. You're going to be playing a pretty physical defense coached under Antonio Pierce for the Raiders in week 1. You get the Panthers in week 2. And then some tough defenses again with the Steelers and the Chiefs in weeks 3 and 4. Then you get your bye week and you can take a step back and, sort of evaluate from there. But that early stretch, I think, is going to be very important to monitor how Justin Herbert looks. But even if they were to go 2-2 in that stretch, I think there's a lot of winnable games down the stretch of this year at this schedule as well. Ultimately, though, I don't think that this is going to be the year that we see the full Jim Harbaugh NFL experience and where he fully comes into his own. I have the Chargers winning 8 games this season. Their over-under line is at 8.5, so I have them very slightly underachieving. But at the same time, 8 wins, especially considering where the Chargers were at last year, if you see the vision of what they are trying to build this season, and if Justin Herbert still looks good, I could see them going out and making their sort of push to make themselves more of a perennial playoff team following this upcoming season. So 8 wins, I think you'll kind of take that in terms of a rebuilding, retooling year. But let me know how you feel about it in the comment section. Looking at how that compares to the rest of the AFC, it is not going to be enough, in my opinion, for the Chargers this year to make the playoffs. But if they are in that conversation for a lot of the year, again, I feel like it's kind of no complaints there. Would be very curious to hear what you all have to say in the comment section, though. So let us know. We are going to be continuing on with our predictions tomorrow as we kick off the NFC East. So we will be diving into that with the Dallas Cowboys. But for now, we're going to be taking a quick break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll be diving into some MLB storylines. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break.